So good afternoon. Today we'd like to discuss housing and ways in which our administration has worked to provide relief to renters and homeowners. But first, I want to give an update on testing and hospitalizations. Yesterday, the state reported that over 10,000 new individuals were tested for COVID-19. Overall, about 1.25 million tests have been administered to date in Massachusetts. Yesterday, there were 142 new positive cases reported, and that brings the statewide total to about 106,000. The 7-day average for the positive test rate remained at about 1.7%, and that positive test rate has dropped by about 95% since the middle of April. There are currently 580 patients hospitalized for COVID-19 statewide, and 80 of those are in the ICU. The 3-day average number of patients in the hospital is down by about 85% since the middle of April. And as of yesterday, 6 hospitals are using surge capacity, but that's primarily related to non-ICU, non-COVID surge. We'll continue to monitor these metrics. It's pretty clear at this point that the Commonwealth has made significant progress to slow the spread of COVID-19 since March, gradually reopen our economy, and expand our testing capacity statewide. But that significant progress is due in large part to the cooperation and the participation of every resident. The Lieutenant Governor and I are incredibly grateful for the role that the people of Massachusetts have played in containing the virus. And this is no time to let down our guard. It's very clear from the research and the data that face coverings are the most important and significant way to stop the spread. And while there's been a lot of back and forth about what the virus is and what the virus isn't over the course of the last 120 days, the one thing we all know for sure is that it spreads from one person to another, and to another. The best and most important thing we can all do here in the Commonwealth is to continue to wear face coverings if you can't distance, to distance wherever you can, to be outdoors if you can be outdoors instead of indoors, to wash your hands and practice safe hygiene and disinfect surfaces. And if you're sick or you have symptoms, reach out to your provider. It's what telehealth is there for, and that's what our great provider community here in Massachusetts is there for. And stay home and get tested. The statewide average, as we all know, has hovered on a positive test basis at around 2% for the past couple of weeks. But obviously, we have seen, as we said last week, slightly higher averages in a number of communities around the Commonwealth where we also saw a drop in testing activity. So to encourage more testing in those communities, we launched a program to provide free testing in 8 communities that still see a higher average of positive tests and had seen a drop in testing. Free testing in these 8 communities started last Friday, and the Command Center will continue to monitor the results and expand to other communities if necessary. We all need to remain vigilant with respect to our activities here in Massachusetts so that we can continue to contain COVID-19. We all have a responsibility. You have been terrific in living up to yours, and we would just ask you to all continue to play by the rules, do the things that stop the spread, be willing to comply with the rules that have been developed by our Reopening Advisory Board, the general guidelines that have been put out by the Department of Public Health, and the other data and information that's available through your local communities. It's especially important as the rest of the country has experienced significant increases in recent weeks that we stay vigilant here in Massachusetts. We're also continuing to talk with our colleagues in local government and with our residents about what issues they face and how we can help them deal with the many other issues that exist in Massachusetts outside of COVID. On July 1st, we launched a $20 million fund for rental and mortgage assistance for low-income households. That $20 million fund was a mix of federal funding from the CARES Act and federal reserves. The money will invest in more access to emergency housing resources for families who need it. If you're a low-income household that's facing financial hardship related to COVID-19, please reach out to one of the 11 regional RAFT administering agencies. RAFT stands for
Residential Assistance.
Residential Assistance for Families in Transition. To one of those 11 agencies that administer this program to apply for help with your rent or your mortgage. The contact information can be found by visiting mass.gov/DHCD and clicking on COVID-19 updates. There's also $20 million in rental assistance and support currently in a supplemental that's before the legislature that we believe we're going to get sometime in the next couple of days. And in addition to that, today we're announcing that we'll begin distributing an additional $20 million on top of the other 220s in federal money that we've received through the CARES Act. That means in total, we will have approximately $80 million in CARES Act funding that we've put to work to support people with respect to housing. Today's $20 million investment will be distributed across 181 communities for food assistance, homelessness prevention, and for hard-hit small businesses through the Community Development Block Grant, or CDBG program. This funding is for non-entitlement communities as defined by HUD as municipalities with less than 50,000 people, and is an important part of how we're leveraging state and federal assets to meet this moment. The pandemic has caused communities to scale up and expand food assistance programs. We'll have more to say about this next week, including delivery options, which have been a critical part for many folks at risk. This new funding will also help micro enterprises, very small businesses that have 5 or less employees with up to $10,000 in grants. And some communities will be able to use this funding to provide job training for in-demand positions, especially in places like healthcare. The funding will help our communities support households who've lost employment, households who are struggling to access food, homebound seniors who are unable to get to the grocery store, and much, much more. We're pleased that in addition to the funding the state received, our 37 federally designated entitlement cities and towns in general communities that exceed 50,000 people in population that receive funding directly from HUD also received another $40 million. Those communities are using these resources in many of the same ways that today's funding will be used to support small businesses, community services, and people in need. We're also pleased to see many of our communities setting up additional emergency rental assistance programs that can supplement our RAFT and IRMA programs. DHCD is working with our partners at Mass Housing Partnership and at CHAPA to create great resources for communities who want to set up their own emergency rental assistance programs. The Department of Housing and Community Development has received $160 million in CARES Act funding across a variety of grant programs. They're distributing the funds across municipalities, shelter providers, community action agencies, and other service providers to meet the needs in various communities. And we're grateful to the Massachusetts delegation for securing these federal resources, and will continue to utilize them in the most appropriate way possible in conjunction with our colleagues in local government and the many nonprofits that are part of this community as well. All of this funding builds on many of the efforts that we've launched across our administration to support families during the pandemic. Additionally, we're encouraged by discussions with the legislature we've had relative to our Partnerships for Growth legislation that we filed originally in March and updated last month. That bill has more than $275 million in investments in it. It includes $85 million for housing efforts, including new climate-resilient, affordable housing and neighborhood stabilization in communities that were hit hard by COVID-19. And it also includes $50 million to support small and diverse businesses, especially those owned by minorities, women, veterans, and immigrants. This funding is an important step to support many of our communities. Now, since taking office, we've invested in several resources and worked collaboratively with the legislature to support more affordable housing, especially in the 18 housing bond bill, the largest that's ever been enacted that we signed. We've also filed a housing choice bond bill to make it possible for communities to build additional housing in their cities and towns. And we look forward to working with our colleagues in the legislature to expand housing and make it more affordable.